Members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here this morning to share my personal experience with social media censorship and discrimination. I am a conservative opinion columnist with the Boston Herald. My popular columns championing traditional Republican values and the Trump administration are nationally syndicated. I'm also a Boston Herald radio host who interviews congressional lawmakers, leaders of government, including the President of the United States, who's been a guest on my radio show. I'm also a Fox News commentator who appears regularly on the network. I am being discriminated against by social media networks who are censoring my conservative columns, radio interviews, and posts on its platform. This is a daily occurrence on Twitter and has been happening for a long time. My well-received conservative column is often the front page feature in the Boston Herald and gets heavy traction and readership, except on Twitter. Virtually every week, if not bi-weekly, when the Herald publishes my column, it becomes the #1 most read and shared piece on the Herald's website or close to it. But the same exact column isn't hardly getting any traction on Twitter when I post it there because it's secretly being censored by Twitter, which is why many of my Twitter followers report they don't see my columns and posts in their feeds. For example, my Boston Herald column titled Russia Truth Coming Out, dated May 22nd, 2018, was the #1 trending piece on the Herald site. It got 62,300 Facebook shares on the Herald site and hundreds of comments. But the same column on Twitter got virtually 0 traction. To be exact, it got only 11 retweets, 26 likes, and 2 comments. On April 5th, my column titled Trump, Exactly Who We Need versus China was the #1 trending piece again at the Boston Herald's website, getting heavy traction and engagement, but on Twitter, the same exact column got 9 likes, 5 shares. Last week, September 20th, my column titled No Holds Barred in Democrats' Attacks was again the #1 trending piece on the Herald site, but on Twitter, the same column got 15 likes and 6 retweets. This is just a small sample of the blatant censorship and egregious discrimination I am being subjected to on a regular basis on Twitter. Please note that not only are my popular columns leading the Herald's website and getting heavy traction or readership there, it's often picked up by other major media nationally, including the USA Today, the Washington Post, Real Clear News, Fox News, and many other outlets, and getting significant traction virtually everywhere except Twitter. I can provide scores of additional examples, but given the limited time I have for testimony, I am sharing just a tiny fraction of the censorship I am experiencing on Twitter. I am happy to provide additional corroborating evidence for the record upon request. I have over 16,000 Twitter followers, and the vast majority of them aren't seeing my columns and posts because they're being blocked by Twitter. Here are a few examples. On March 25th, 2018, I asked Tony Schaefer, he's blue check mark verified, in a direct message if he's seeing my columns in his feed. Mr. Schaefer replied, quote, nope, not seeing them, end quote. On March 25th, 2018, I asked Dan Bongino, blue check mark verified, if he's seeing my columns in his feed. Mr. Bongino responded, quote, I have not been seeing the columns. They're messing with me too. It's a cesspool, end quote. On September 5th, 2018, I sent another message to Dan Bongino on Twitter to see if he had seen just a tweet I posted about Nike. Mr. Bongino responded, quote, I didn't see it either, end quote. On September 6th, I asked Tom Borelli, blue check mark verified on Twitter, if he saw my column I posted on Judge Kavanaugh on his Twitter feed. Mr. Borelli responded, quote, I did not see it, and I just looked at my feed since last night and didn't see it either, end quote. On June 4th, another Twitter follower of mine, Right Sider Reagan, told me, quote, I've been following you, but you never come up on my feed, FYI, end quote. On March 26th, Jeff Katz told me via direct message on Twitter, quote, no, not seeing your stuff in my feed, end quote. On September 6th, Steve Tomkowicz posted on Twitter, wow, I check my feed every day and scroll way down. I can't remember the last time I've seen a tweet from you. This is the first on my feed in quite a while, end quote. On March 29th, Michael Santoro said, quote, I follow you but never see your columns. This happens with other conservatives I follow, end quote. On September 6th, Susie Light posted on Twitter, I never in capitalizations, see your tweets unless you say something like this. I'm sorry this happens to you, end quote. There are many other Twitter followers who tell me they don't see my post in their feeds. I am submitting additional evidence for the record. I could go on and on for an hour of screenshots and quotes of my Twitter followers who tell me that they did not see my tweets or columns in their feeds. I asked the committee to consider this scenario. Imagine if the phone company refused to connect phone calls between two parties because they didn't like the opinions expressed in the conversation. This is exactly what Twitter is doing to me and thousands of conservatives like me every single day throughout the nation. This type of egregious censorship is trampling on my constitutional rights, including my rights to free speech. It's also censoring lawmakers and heads of government agencies because I interview important members of our government and often include excerpts from those radio interviews in my columns. That means when social media networks block distribution of my conservative columns and podcasts, they are also censoring members of Congress. This discrimination is hurting the American people who are being denied access to vital information from government officials, information that impacts their lives. On Facebook, my posts are also being censored. Many of my Facebook followers tell me they don't see my columns and posts in their feeds. I reached out to Twitter and Facebook for an explanation on multiple occasions and have not received a response. By censoring my columns, podcasts, and television appearances, these social networks are damaging my career as a female columnist, television commentator, and radio personality. They're also hurting other conservative voices also being silenced. And they are hurting the business sector, including my employer, the Boston Herald, the Creator Syndicate, and other outlets who are being denied clicks to its website every time my column and content is censored by these social media networks. But most importantly, social media networks are meddling in U.S. elections by allowing its users who possess liberal viewpoints unfettered access to its platforms and voters while silencing scores of conservatives. This rigs the electoral system because Twitter and Facebook are giving Democrats the ability to shape public opinion and connect with millions of voters while denying that same opportunity to scores of conservatives, including myself. I've written several columns on this topic that I'm happy to submit to the committee. Twitter and Facebook are deceiving the American people.
I'd ask you to summarize your testimony if you could, please. We're over a couple of minutes.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. So I just want to say that I've never said anything that's hate speech or anything close to it, so there's no justification whatsoever for social media networks to be silencing a mainstream conservative like myself.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen.